Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Market Mystics. It has been just a little bit since we've had a guest. And so we are really excited for today to bring back one of our favorite guests that we've had. And we were just looking before the episode started. It's been over a year since this guest has been back. Jeff Domansky, welcome back to the Market Mystics podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thanks. I'm glad to be back. It's crazy. It's been 13 months.
I know it's really interesting to just like look at the history of like where things have been and gone. And
Right.
like, it feels like just yesterday we were like recording with you and a bunch of other people. And then we go look and it's like, oh man, that was well over a year ago that we did that. That's wild.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been just over a year since you've been here. What have you been up to?
Well, a total rebranding in a sense, not just in looks and feels, but really kind of, as I mentioned earlier, a business model change and a redirection, at least in the current season, towards really producing content like podcast material, articles for a publication on Substack. Previously, and I'm still doing it, but I was really heavily doing more music oriented. Last time we chatted, I was getting into subliminal messaging and subliminal affirmation and doing that in my music, which is still there. But the middle or towards the beginning of last year or this year, excuse me, um, the father was really just dropping this thing. I want you to still open your mouth, just do the podcast. And I'm sure you guys understand it. It's difficult to just start doing stuff, start doing a podcast, start pushing record. And because you want to have it all organized, the structure, the layout, you want the flow, you want your topic and, solidified so that you're not just rambling on. And so my first attempts in January of this year were just like, what was the point? Like, I'm not even giving this to my family. It's so bad. And so I just kind of put it on the burner and I just kept doing what I was doing with music and kind of creating that way. But every time I'd go back, and just sit with the father to talk about the future, the direction of Segullah Studios, he kept coming back saying, I told you to open your mouth. And so it just took a really long time for me to just finally pull the trigger and begin to do it. And part of that process. So I started the podcast in September this year. That's how long it took, right? 6-7 months to get there. I had to go through a reinvention of myself or reinvention of the platform. One of the things that I think most people, content creators, probably struggle with this idea of, or struggle with the sense of value, right? What am I providing? What value am I presenting? Is it something that my listeners value or complete strangers? Would they hear my stuff and say, hey, I want to hear more of it? Is it something that's valuable to the people, things we all long for as influencers, right? And it was a real struggle for me because I know I was supposed to do something. I knew I was supposed to do what I was doing, but at the same time, it was like crickets you know, in the room and nothing was happening. That the real, just being transparent, the real uh hard moment was when I released my last track called Expansion back in May. Um it like 3 people bought it. And I'm like, I spent hours on this. I put my heart and soul, all the verbiage used to create this content. And I knew I was supposed to do it. And I put it out there and I'm like, oh, nobody's looking at this. What's going on? What's the point? Why bother? I've got plenty of other things I could do with my life. Right. And I just had a real heart to heart with the father about this. And he started to really reshape my viewpoint. He actually brought me back to a conversation we'd had back in 2019, December 2019, when he first began to say, let's step out into this business, Segullah Studios. He had spoken to me then about wanting to build a business that was different, ran different, had a different business model than what I was used to. And I probably mentioned it in our last show about this, where it was this concept where people are not your resource, that you produce and you create, and you are the resource. Your resource comes from the one who created you, Father, right? This is the concept that he was giving to me. I said, it sounds great, but I don't really know what it means. I thought I did, right? So when I said, yeah, I sign on to that, you're my source. I don't have to worry about funding from anybody else. I'm just going to create and I'm going to give it to people. And, I'm going to continue trusting you for my resource, for my finances, for uh, influence, for all those things. He'd said, I'm going to be your marketer, basically. So I said, thumbs up. We're going to go after that. Sounds good. And then I proceeded to do what everybody else does. I proceeded to market myself. I proceeded to try and find the right sweet spot for selling my music and the right, way of doing it, and doing all the things I think I'm supposed to do to make it go, make it fly, make it uh, something that people want.
Mm.
And I just, for a year, just beating my head against the wall. I'm like, trying this, trying that. And all the while, just getting frustrated because I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, Father, I think, in my understanding, and yet nothing's moving. And it's getting frustrating, and you put your hope and trust in him, and you continue just to stand on what you believe you're supposed to do. At the same time, you're wrestling with the emotions of something that you desire to manifest, is supposed to manifest, but you're not seeing anything coming, not in the way or expectation that you had set up for it. So bring it fast forward then back to this summer, or late spring, and I'm hitting the wall with this. He brought me back to that thing he told me about, December 2019. And essentially I forget what it was. It's always something that you're not looking for. And then it's kind of a slap across the face. And it's like, remember? So he eventually, in this dialogue, this heart to heart conversation in May, he brought me to Isaiah 55, and 55 verse 1 and 2 basically is the invitation from the Father to say, come and buy without money, without cost. Come and purchase from me bread and wine
Mm.
without having to provide resource. Just this is trade with the Father to receive his resource without cost on your end, which is kind of interesting because we always talk about sacrifice. But the idea is that you have nothing to give me that I want other than just you coming. I want you. So I don't need your money. I don't need your wealth. I just need you, right? And I'm glossing over this, but when he spoke this, he said, this is your business model. I want you to not sell your stuff. I want you to give it away. I want you to create a place where you can give your content, your music, everything that you produce with your voice and your hands. I just want you to resource people with it, give it to them for free without cost. Come and buy it without cost. Because I am your source. I will supply all your needs far and beyond what you imagine. And I'll open up the doors for you, as I said. When I heard him do this, obviously explosions go off inside, right? When we get this aha moment, we get this explosive emotion. And I felt this excitement, relief, and confusion and uncertainty. And, the other voices saying, are you nuts? Are you crazy? Heck, this is a horrible business model. You can't make any money off this. What are you thinking? Right. And that obviously I wrestled with that, but I knew in the core of my being, I knew this is what he wants me to do. So through June and July, I began to just reshape everything. I went on my selling platforms. I used Gumroad for that. I changed up anywhere there was a price. I removed the price. Matter of fact, I leave it up like in Gumroad. You can go up and you can purchase my stuff with zero. Just put a zero and get it for free. But it's interesting because it's still you still push the buy button,
Mm.
right? And so they're
Mhm.
buying without cost, which I think is really kind of a cool manifestation of some of this in this Isaiah 55 principle that I'm playing out here. And I just began to reshape that. And then the other thing was, Father, help me to um, reshape my image. So Segullah Studios, I've talked about what Segullah is as a definition, Hebraic word. You find it like 6 times in the Old Testament. Pride, it's usually treasure, precious treasure, king's treasure, jewel. Basically, the name that Father gives Yahweh or gives Israel. It was a name He gave me, and so it was a personal one. But I always struggled between using this name as a business or as my moniker, or having it some as just a personal, artist mark. And so I was waffling upon it. And again, a conversation, you talk about identity and stepping into who you're supposed to be. When we don't have the identity solidified and we're waffling, it makes it real difficult for things to land on, right? It
Hmm.
makes it difficult for the manifestation of the spirit, the manifestation of the imagination to land on something because you're waffling. And the secular world would say you need to get your branding figured out, right? You're confusing the people. It's very loosey goosey. You need to figure it out. Well, there's some truth to that in the spirit realm because He gives us a name for a purpose of landing something on it to manifest it. And when we're uncertain of the identity of our name and we're waffling on it, it makes it really difficult. It's like trying to land an aircraft carrier on it, or an aircraft carrier, in the seas that are heaving. If you aren't certain of what it's supposed to land on, it's difficult for them to bring out of the unseen the scene. So he really ironed that out and said, I want you're Segullah. So I changed the logo and I went with this, which has this huge story behind it. Literally it's a combination of all the living letters in the name Segullah. And there is this whole backstory that is not just, it's cool for me, especially because it helps me, gives me a marker for where I'm going. Um, but the way in which it provides purpose and identity in what I say and what I do is the real um, significance of the mark. And so, um, taking that and saying, okay, this is my stamp. This is every time I see this, this is the stamp of who I am. It's not just the business, but who I am. And then when I'm doing stuff, this is through the way I'm operating, and it's a the signpost to me to remind me who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that really in July, June began to shape out. And then finally, and I'm throwing a lot of stuff because I'm trying to bring it's like one of those, when the iPhone or Apple puts together that year in review thing and you're trying to throw a slideshow together, all it feels like I'm trying to throw all these pictures and try to encapsulate the whole year in a 30-second slideshow, which is always fails, but try my best. Fast forward or coming into September, I finally said, all right, I'm going to stop dragging my feet. I'm just going to turn on the mic, turn on the camera, and I'm going to start recording. I'm just going to put stuff in it. I'm just going to produce. And that's what I did. I started producing, create, and trying to do a weekly episode and getting the podcast out. I didn't even care who was going to listen to it because the instructions were open my mouth, not make sure people are listening to it. And so that's what I did. I turned it on and been going ever since September weekly, at least weekly. I try to do a weekly recording and um, then also do an article. And now I'm doing what's called do weekly posts as well called the Daily Bread Revealed, which is I'm taking the living letters of Hebrew verbs and I'm diving into the pictographs, which are the the pictures that are the story behind all those Hebrew word letters, and diving into the mystery of them, and just every day putting up a new mystery of Hebrew word, a Hebrew verb, and doing illustrations of it. And it's been fun. It's kept me real busy because I'm creating art, also doing a little deep dive in scripture at the same
Mhm.
time. And I'm trying to produce 5 a week with hopes to doing something, maybe a calendar someday down the road. But just a way to use um, what Father's been teaching me over the years in a way to be creative. So with that and the podcast and the articles, just really been really busy in a good way. Uh, so, but it took me a while. It took me several months to stop dragging my feet, to turn on the mic, turn on the camera, and just start going. So it's been fun.
Very cool. I want to rewind just a little bit to what you said about how the Father gave you instructions to open your mouth. It wasn't about the branding and it wasn't about building a following. And I want to pinpoint this because I know that there are other people who have been in the same situation. We've been in the same situation. When we started this show, it was instructions to simply do it. It was not to try to get a following. But I think when we do that, really what he's asking us to do is partner with him in it, right? Like take the
Right.
step and I'm opening the door. I'm making the way and he'll
Right.
build the following and he'll bring the people who we need or who need what we are sharing because that's part of how he operates, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I love that you talked about that because I think sometimes that's one of the biggest hurdles for I mean just people who aren't necessarily like limelight people. Like
Right.
it sounds like probably the three of us are, right? Um, and it's one of those things where it's like you said exactly. I don't have all the planning out. I don't have all of the this setup or the branding or the website or the whatever. When he's not asking you to do those things, he's asking you to just start,
Right.
right?
Mm.
And
Yep.
sometimes it's those hurdles that we've placed in front of ourselves that we need to get past because he's going, I'm opening the door, just walk through it.
Right.
Stop putting stuff in the way, right?
Right. Well, and there's the platforms of today, just looking at the different social platforms that we use to publish, to produce, um, the culture that surrounds them is really, it drives metrics. I mean, everything they put in front of your face, the numbers, you see graphs, you see charts, you see all this information that's supposed to inform you as to how well you're doing or not doing, you know? And that's a real challenge. When you're just trying to do what he says to do, it's really easy to get caught up again in the number game, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How many people listen to it today, and just keep going back and checking the numbers. It's really easy to get caught up in it. And that's, I think, one of the challenges when you're really focused on just producing because you're being obedient, because you're just wanting to listen to him and follow that. If you haven't built those boundaries in, it's, you could just be slid right into being caught up in playing the game of what all influencers, social media influencers, are struggling with is who's listening to me and how many. And so you have to guard your heart and your mind in that. I still do it even though I
Yeah.
know I'm just supposed to open my mouth and create. There's two things that I struggle with the most. That is my firstborn personality. I've got perfection. I want it to look good, sound good. I want it to be concise. And then there's a tendency to want to shift my what I'm supposed to be speaking based on what people are wanting to hear, right? Tickling the
Mm-hmm.
ears of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
There's that draw to do that because why we do that, then we know numbers increase, right? So there's this play. And I think when we get hooked into the number game and we're worried about who's listening and what they think about it, uh, we begin to gradually shift our voice towards what they want us to say, what they want to hear, not
Mm-hmm.
what he's wanting to say and what he is trying to speak through us. That's the real. challenge for those who want to be obedient to that voice. Open your mouth, but then keep your ear to my mouth, because this is designed, and it really is. Those social media platforms are designed to funnel you a certain way of
Right.
producing, and you have to be really on guard, otherwise you get caught up in it. So I'm constantly keeping short account. I pull up the platform and I look, oh wait, okay, just take a look. Don't spend a lot of time trying to measure what's going on, because it's just going to get your eye off of what you need to be doing. And I think that would, if I would tell anybody trying to do this, if you're doing this because the Father's told you to do it, then be guarding your heart in the process, so you don't get caught up in all of the other things that draw your attention and will influence your voice in the way that it's not supposed to go.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. When we first started, Josh, how long was it? Probably almost a year. We
Almost a
got
year.
up to like 35 subscribers. And
Yeah.
we're like, good, we're nailing it, right? But truly, honestly, when we started, it was a reluctant start on our part. Wouldn't you say,
I
Josh?
remember.
Yeah.
And it really was because the Lord was leading there. But then we saw those things. We're thinking, if he led us there, he's going to make it blow up, right? Like,
Right.
this is how it's going to
Right.
work. That's what he
Yeah.
does. And we're a year into it, and we have 35 listeners, and probably half or more of those are family or friends. And um and it was something that we talked about every now and then, but honestly, it we had to get to the point where it doesn't matter. Like, we
Mhm.
really are doing this because he's telling us to do it, and we'll say whatever he needs us to say. And if somebody finds it, they find it. And if they don't, they don't. And I'll tell you, our following is not at that place anymore. Um, but we still don't put a ton of stock in it. We're still going to
Right.
have the conversations that we're having. Most of the
Right.
conversations that come out are because this is what the Lord's leading us to, or these are things that we need to wrestle through. And they're legitimate conversations that these two friends would have regardless of whether we were recording or not, you know? And I
Yeah.
think it's so important. I just love that you see that on the front end, because it really is. So many people just don't want to put it out there because it doesn't look like the rest of what maybe social media or another podcast or a YouTube channel might look like. But I don't think that's what matters. It's not what matters at all.
Well, and the driving force for me goes back to not just identity, uh, but purpose and function. Why do we walk on
Mm.
the face of the earth in the first place? What we're designed to be.
Oh,
And, based on what we were talking earlier about your previous episode on limitless, when you're limitless, the measure of success shifts dramatically, because the world is built on a structure of lack. And so everything that they do, that the systems of the world do, are built to increase where there is lack. And when you try to live as one who's limitless in a society, or try to function like a limitless person in a society who is limited, you can't do the same things that they do. You can't
yeah.
think the same way that the systems think. Otherwise, you're going to get drawn into the Babylon systems of lack and want.
Yeah.
But so you have to reshape the way you do everything, the way you think about just the everyday in day and out of day activities and functions, because you're sourcing from a unlimited place. You don't do the same things. I don't concern myself about the numbers because I'm numberless in a sense. I'm not
Mhm.
concerned about my resource because I've got a limitless resource in my Father. Right? These things become are at first academic, but then in the course of creating a business, creating a platform, they become your everyday bread and butter decision makers. Right? They no longer academic. They're now where the rubber meets the road. And I need to make my decisions based on this reality that I have an unlimited supply of everything I need. right? The
Mhm.
Spirit has given me everything for life and godlikeness. And so I'm going to tap into that, not just on a Sunday morning church service, not just in the academic, the head space where I have a wonderful conversation and come away feel lifted because I believe this. Because the real belief comes when you are faced with a world that is in your face saying you don't have.
Right.
And you have to respond with, yes, I do. And believe, and then begin to walk on that faith, right? And see that manifest. But when I when I rebuilt in June, I had to remind myself I'm limitless. I don't need to worry about my income coming from the music I'm selling. You know, I don't need to worry about the numbers of people I'm influencing with my voice because my voice is limitless. Who knows where the voice is resonating? Because we're multidimensional beings, my voice not just resonates to the hearer on the speaker, but there is a spirit realm that is also reverberating with my voice. And it's impacting and shaping the world around me in ways I cannot see. And so I have to think in the limitless space when I'm doing simple things like creating a social media uh, post. I need to think in that way all the time. It needs to be the filter that I funnel all my content
Mm.
because then I will, if I don't start from that space, I'll shortchange my voice and I'll incorporate want and lack into it, which brings
Oh,
along its companions of fear and worry at the same time. And I don't want them at my door. I don't want them involved in my creation process. I want it pure and simplified through the voice of a limitless being. And that helps. It's important because it will if you don't have it set up that way in the beginning of the starting of all little points of creation, writing an article, starting a podcast. If that's not the beginning point, then you're trying to backtrack after the fact and figure out how to shape something that was formed out of lack to meet this to come into the concept of limitlessness. So I find it easier just to start in a limitless mindset so that everything that I produce flows with that spirit in it, and I'm not struggling and wrestling with the lack and want that comes from shortchanging my voice by thinking in the way of the systems of the world. Um, yeah, it's a big part. It's a big part of my thought life, right? It's not just something I academically think about. It's in my speech. It's in my raising my kids. It's in my interaction, my relationships with people. It's kind of funny because it's you hear it now when you eat and breathe something. It comes up everywhere. You
yeah.
hear it in conversations. You can tell when someone is living out of the lack of want. They're not really they haven't really latched on to the limitless lifestyle because their voice and their mannerisms and the way they think and speak belie that, in the conversation. Like I've been having to bite my tongue a couple times because part of relationship is not to just force your religion upon people, right? But but it's just like, oh wow. It's so in the limited mindset is so woven into the fabric of society and culture um, that we don't even see how it permeates even just the church culture. And it's so insidious and woven into the fabric of society that unless you're really paying attention, you don't see it. And it's all those little things that keep us from staying in the mind of limitless beings. And so um, getting in the place of that, just dialoguing with people about it helps to instill it here so that it can become a daily thing in the
Yeah.
process of producing, of opening the mouth and creating, using your hands, your body to create this this message of limitless lifestyle.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying. It's making me think about a conversation Kim and I have had a lot about. One of the things that we've really appreciated about our podcast is it has kept like one of the big things that every year when we pray about our podcast, we get is consistency. Like
Mhm.
just keep putting
Doing.
episodes
Yep.
out, keep doing it. And at first we were like, well, that's just, that's how people find you, that's how you get
Right.
views. But what it's done is it's really forced us to stay in relationship with him, because that's really where our content comes from. I
Right.
mean, more often than not, before we press record, we sit down and we pray about, what are we recording about? How do you want this delivered? And so the consistency has kept us on the journey. And that's been like the biggest thing that we've learned through this. Is it's not like, it's amazing if other people get takeaways from our life and our journey, but having this out there forces us to stay in it and to stay
Yeah.
seeking. And that's what I'm like hearing from you, is like with the limitless stuff, it's even just putting, like, not having a price on your stuff anymore is, um could seem fearful, because, well, that's my source of income. But at the same time, you're taking the lid off of what people might pay for your stuff.
Right.
Mhm.
And I heard Justin Paul Abraham talk about this with his Patreon, where they used to have like a minimum of, they had tiers, like, what, I don't know
Yeah.
what the pricing
Yeah.
was, but they had tiers, and they took it away and they just said, pay whatever you want.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, the amount that they were getting significantly increased, because all of a sudden people didn't have the box anymore, and they were like, well, what could I do? Well, I could do this, but that's not an option on their tiers. Well,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden that's not an issue anymore. And so I love how even just that act, which is like, uh seemingly in the world's mind like the exact opposite way to approach it,
Mhm.
Yeah.
uh is actually in line with the limitless stuff. Even if nobody actually
Absolutely.
pays for it, it's still an act that is in line with that mindset.
Yeah.
Mm,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And you hit on something very important here, is relationship.
mm,
One of the things that I have, by being consistent, even before starting the podcast, just in different places where I was speaking and having dialogue with people, I was seeing relationship is integral, is the mantra. It all comes back to relationship.
Mhm.
So you create this business model that allows relationship to grow, where people are not your product, they're
mm,
not your resource, they are your relational context, relational connections. And the when it shifts to relationship, it allows you then, and allows your audience or your community to then also come into that same spirit, come into the limitless spirit. You're not worried about how much someone's paying you anymore. You're not concerned about it, whether they buy it or don't buy it, whether they pay money for something or not. You have moved off the table this need for a reimbursement of services, and said,
Mhm.
I am going to be here as a relational context for you. And
Yeah.
I want to connect at that point. And we don't have to worry about funding. We don't have to worry about resource, because that's taken care of. Because we live in a household of limitless resources. Our Father's household is limitless. He supplies, He sets the table for all of us. We eat at His table and we partake of His goodness, and we get to break bread and build relationship. That's why He set it up that way. We don't worry about that stuff. We don't worry about clothes. We don't worry about food. We don't worry about shelter. We're about seeking the kingdom and His righteousness, which is about relationship, which is about sitting at the table with one another and restoring relationship, growing relationship, and creating this synergistic
Mm.
trading. Because that's really what we're doing with Isaiah 55, is a synergistic trading, where two come together and create something greater than the individuals creating by themselves, right? Two or three gather my name, synergistically, we create something. We create what's called the limitless, ever increasing. which seems paradox. You've got a limitless kingdom, but then at the same time, it's increasing. What does that look like, right? The infinite increase. Okay. Get that around your head. But when we come together in 2 or 3 in a relationship, we create something for that kingdom, that environment, that reality to manifest. But if we put limitations on, prices, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't put prices on. Don't get me wrong. What Father's revealing to me in the decision that He's calling me into is that by removing certain limitations, relational, financial, those dynamics, I create a place for the limitless to land, and the dynamic that He wants expressed can manifest in me and in the one that I'm connecting with, I'm trading with. And it's an awesome thing because it supersedes what the world systems are like. It manifests the kingdom as it's intended in the expression of Christ when we're gathered in that dynamic. And then we get to see really what Father means when He takes care of His children, when His hand rests upon His people and His government and His resources flow through. And then we just simply get to sit at the table and enjoy and participate. And the outflow of that interaction, that trading, produces something so much more significant and eternal than what we could do in ourselves through the known business plans and business strategies that the world uses. I think this is the foolishness that confounds the wise, that delights the Father when His children say yes to it, because He wants to showcase us. That's the reality. Like what you were saying, Kim, earlier about if we listen to Him, we have this internal expectation that when we say yes and we are obedient, then we know it's going to blow up because we're wired that way. And I don't think that's wrong to think. I think our expectation, how and when it blows up, is what we get tripped up on, because His desire is to showcase us, right? That's the whole idea of the Segullah, the gem, the jewel, is to showcase. Israel is to showcase His goodness in creation. But the journey to that showcase is full of transformation for that gem. That raw, rough gem has to go through a proofing time, a beautification process, right? And that's the part we kind of put to the side. We think, yeah, we know it's got to be part of the process, but when we actually hit it, we're frustrated because we wanted it to happen sooner. I know that I wanted it sooner, but I also know that the journey to where I'm at even today has been such a beautiful journey, a transformation of my own relationship with my Father, that I wouldn't trade it up for anything. And I wouldn't trade up for having 1 million subscribers. I wouldn't trade up for 1,000 subscribers. It's something that you can't earn by just doing the steps of what the world systems tell you to do. It's got to be done through this detour route of relationship and saying, okay, I like what you got and I'm going to say yes to it, but I don't know what that road looks like. And just saying yes to Him and then taking a step every day, consistently taking a step, right? One foot in front of the other, to allow Him to beautify you, to bring you to to build in you the character and the nature that will be able to contain and hold and steward the explosion when it happens, right? And then say yes to that, walk through that, and allow His timing and His placement to bring about what He desires, which is the showcase. But here's the secret. This is what I really discovered. When that happens, you won't care, because the transformation takes out of you the motivation of those things, because the fascination, the journey shifts the fascination away from what you wanted originally to saying, all I care about is you.
Yep.
All I care about is a relationship. All I care about is speaking to you and about you in their ears. If they want to hear, that's great. If I have a crowd of one, doesn't matter. If I have a crowd of a million, doesn't matter. Because my fascination is just you and I dialoguing.
Yeah.
Just the Father and myself in conversation, I being a conduit of his voice. Imagine Christ standing in front of Lazarus's tomb, right? And what does he say? I know, we're on the same wavelength. I don't need to say any of this stuff because we're connected. But on behalf of these others here, I'm going to say these things about you. And we're going to have this conversation. But he could have left it or taken it. It was all about his relationship with his father and letting that manifest however it would in front of whoever was there. Whether it was just 3 or 5,000 people, it didn't matter to him because he was obediently listening to his father's voice every day. But his fascination was his father. Everything it talked about was the fascination of the father. And that's the secret that he's been teaching me. It's like, you want to be a bright shining star. You want to illuminate so the world to say, ooh, how beautiful is that? How wise, how wonderful is that? And there's nothing wrong with that because I've made you to be a shining gem. I made you a light, right? But that's an outflow of something greater. And you haven't yet touched on that. And that's the journey. That's the secret, is that when you arrive to the point where you're this bright, shining light in the sky and everybody comes to your light, you don't care because your desire has shifted dramatically to the oneness with him, the face-to-face conversation, and the interactions that you have become the resource for other people. And they look and they say, what is going on here? Oh, I'm just having a conversation with my father, and you get to participate in what I'm creating with him. That's all. And then understanding the beauty of it, being able to invite others into that same relationship so that they can create out of that relationship. That is the core driving force behind what I'm doing. Because at the end of the day, my legacy in the earth is rubbish, right? It's pointless. There's so much in the age of information right now. There's so much to listen to watch, to hear. It's daunting for anybody to put their toe into the pool of social media to be an influencer. There's just so much to be had. There's always somebody doing it better than you. There's always someone having better interviews, better topics, better artwork, better music. There's always somebody doing something better than you're doing right now. And that can be daunting. That can be disheartening. But you're not measured by that. Who you are isn't measured. And especially when you're limitless. What's the point of me building my kingdom, my podcast, so that I have hit that 1 million mark of subscribers? At the end of the day, what's the point? Right? Is my valuation based on how many people are listening to me? How many people I'm influencing? Is my value in the earth what I leave as a legacy, as the measure of what systems say is valuable or not valuable? And that's the struggle that is, I think most people who are they're content creators and influencers, this is a question I think they don't really answer, but is constantly struggling. It's a constant struggle in their heart because it's all about value.
Yeah.
Am I valuable? And is what I'm creating valuable to my listeners? And you see, I mean, this is affecting teenagers. This is a psychological issue for the young adults, young generation. The suicide is at a high rate because of this issue of the heart value. And when one person comments and it just is horrible comment, you see these people that can't manage this influence and they just take a nosedive. And it's horrible. It's sad because their whole life is wrapped around the value of what people are saying about what they produce. And that was I think that was part of my struggle back in May, especially because I knew that wasn't the platform, the bedrock I wanted to build my life on. But it was
Right.
sucking me. It was pull on me. It was these tentacles that were just trying to draw you into the same game. And I just said, I can't do it, but I don't know the way forward. And so I had to have the heart with the Father and say, where's the way forward? When you have a value system that's built in Him, you create a different framework in which to think and to live and breathe, because now it doesn't matter what you say or do, because your value is on what He says and does for you.
Right.
And that's all that matters. Then you're free, because this is the liberty. Then you're free to create whatever you want and how you want, because you're not building your validation upon what other people are going to do, whether people buy your music, whether people listen to your songs, listen to your podcast, doesn't matter.
Right.
And it's very freeing.
Mhm.
And then allows you to tap into the limitless lifestyle that He really in desires and delights to pour upon His children.
Yeah, I think that's so good. I keep thinking about the world system you talked about and how it's a system that's built on lack, right? And when you first said that, I immediately went to value and like, where are we getting our value? And I think you've just really hit the nail on the head with this. Um, because when we don't allow the world system to be our measuring stick of our value, and we're focused on the relationship with the Father and who He says we are, our identity, our purpose, our calling, when we let that be that foundation, then you're right. When we participate in all of these things, and whether we have worldly success or not, it will not determine the value that we're carrying.
Right.
But sometimes it's so easy. I think as believers, and because we talked about this before, like this image that you have to carry, right? As a Christian, like there's these connotations that come with that, but you have to be this something. And there's this tendency to just submit yourself to that system and
Right.
allow others to tell you the value that you carry. And I think that's the mindset shift. We've been talking a lot about this. I think we have a theme for next season already. Like there's mindset shifts, there's like all sorts of these things with this limitless stuff, but if you can just shift it a bit and just shift out of like letting other people tell you what your value is, and just like be tethered to what the Father says your value is,
Yeah.
and be tethered to that relationship, all of a sudden, like you said, those things don't matter anymore. And the analytics can be there, and you can look at them, and you can look at the terrible comments, and you can look at the great comments. And though they are terrible or great, they won't affect like what you truly believe and the value that you carry and the value that you're willing to share. Because I think
Yes.
that can also really be something that uh, puts the kibosh on whether somebody continues to share.
Yes. I agree.
You touched on the and Kim, you've been talking about this too, but the am I valuable? Like a lot of times we measure that by the metrics. We measure it by the views, we measure it by the comments, the likes, the dislikes. And that really is the like you talked about, especially social media with younger people and the challenge of that. Like that is where that comes, but it like I want to say it's rooted in this like orphanness of not knowing who your father is, which does
Absolutely.
not allow you to know that you are just innately valuable.
Absolutely.
And so the journey, the invitation of all of this is like um is you believing you're valuable no matter what the metrics say. So you're going to keep doing it.
Right.
And hopefully that is the message that gets sent to the people who come across your content is, oh, there's something different about this person. Like he's speaking as if he's talking to a million followers, but there's only 10 views on this video. Like, it's that, like, it's Kim and I've talked about this a lot lately, but the way you influence the world is by showing them that you have something better than what they have. And by you having value that they can't perceive is showing them like there's something you have that they don't. And it's just human nature to be like, man, he's got something I don't. How do I get?
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's
That's
interesting because
absolutely.
I can't help but think about when you were saying this, Josh, like operating from a place of the value you carry, like knowing the value as opposed to operating from a place where you're trying to earn the value. And you could you could be saying the same things and it would come off so differently depending on where you're coming from. Are you operating from that place of knowing your value, or are you operating from that place of trying to convince people that you're valuable? You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And it's so different, right?
You can tell actually when you've arrived at that place, your spirit, like I can tell when people are in that spot where they're uncertain of who they are and they're
Mhm.
really striving, really working hard to make it seem like they know who they are and what they have to offer. But but you can hear it in their voice, you can hear it in their mannerisms, in your language. They're really not solidified on who they are. And they're wrestling with their core identity and their relationship, because I believe I'm a staunch believer that our identity and the solidity of our identity comes from how healthy our relationship with our father is. And if that's out of whack, then then our identity will always be out of whack. It'll always have a bend in it that just won't
Mm.
iron out, won't straighten out until that relationship with the father is corrected, until it becomes healthy. Because our identity is formed from his voice. And when we're not sitting under his voice, then an identity can't be shaped properly and it gets misformed by the world's voices. And so you can hear that with people that have struggle with their father relationship, because it's in their language, it's in their body language, it's in the way they present themselves. And having gone the journey, you have this empathy towards them, like, I know what you want and I want to help you. Matter of fact, that's really kind of the premise, the overarching theme of what Segullah Studios podcast is all about. My tagline is become the you he designed you to be. And
Uh,
that's everything that I'm doing, speaking, is trying to awaken the connection in people that what they want to become is completely and directly related to what he has designed them to be, what he has called them to be, how that's formed in relationship. And you can't get it by going over there and over there. You have to do it by sitting in front of the Father and listening to his voice and building and getting that healthy relationship. And when you establish that relationship and you begin to unravel the beauty and mystery of your name, your character, your nature, then your purpose starts to shape up and make sense and flows smoothly. It just like this, it's like a second nature to you because it was
mhm.
always formed in your DNA. It was always formed in the spectrum of your voice, and and sitting underneath the Father and building that relationship allowed the right carrier wave to show up, so that that frequency could actually ride and be manifest, and not be in conflict, and not have this dissonance within your being and your nature, because you're not sitting under anymore the voices of the world systems that say you need to perform this way, you need to speak this way in order to be liked and to be loved and be wanted. Because
Yeah.
now you're sitting on a vibration of consistent love and want and desire towards you and supply. And now you can resonate freely and in a healthy way who you were designed to be. And so all of the things that I try to do is to awaken that in people, illuminate the treasure within, and come to this realization that he already has a design that's woven into your fabric, into your nature. that he wants to vibrate in you. But you gotta restore that relationship with the Father in order for that identity to come to the surface and begin to then produce as he made you to produce. And then you don't have the competition. That's the other beauty, is then I'm not in strident competition with my brother, my sister, my neighbor, because he perfectly designed us to coexist in the fullness of our creativity, in the fullness, in the full expression of who we are. It doesn't, it becomes part of a harmony, a symphony of humanity as we resonate together. There is a unique frequency that blends into the rest of the species when you find that place. Right now, we're in strident discord because we're all trying to figure out where we fit into the orchestra, where we all fit, and we feel like we're fighting over a postage stamp when we've got, millions of square acres we can stand and do our thing and set up shop. But we're so limited that these are only the frequencies we can communicate on, and there's already somebody in my spot. So now I got to compete against them. In a
Yeah.
limitless society, there is no space, there's no limit to this space where you can move and have your full expression. And Father's designed us as a species to properly fit and to mesh and to beautify and to glorify each other in our fullest expression without diminishing anybody else. As a matter of fact, again, going back to the synergy thing, when we finally have identity and we're meshing, or two or three gathered together, that's where the vibration increases and the individual glory actually adds to the community glory. And we create something. And this is what I think when people talk about transcendent human species transcending to its next stage. I actually did a podcast on this, that humanity will transcend in community. It won't be individuals doing it. It will be a community. It will be a human species transcendency, because it requires the whole. There's a term called quantum and quanta. Quantum is the individual discrete. We're individual discrete units within a quanta of community. And so the quanta needs to find its discrete identity in order for the quanta identity, the community identity, to come into its full expression. But as long as we're dissonant and struggling against each other because we're struggling with our own identity, the quanta can never grow, can never transcend, can never bubble over into the greater glory, because you're struggling at your individual level. When I realized this, I said, I need to not just make sure that my identity is established, I need to make sure that my neighbor's identity is well established and is healthy.
Yeah.
Because I can't go to the transcendedness without them. I have to go with them. It's designed in the framework of the species that Yahweh made mankind. And so relationship, that dynamic of helping another person come to the fullness of their being, is crucial for us as a species in the likeness of our creator to grow into that full glory and the full maturity of Christ, as Paul talks about in Ephesians. And it removes, with that concept, as that construct is resting upon us, that removes competition, because now I can't compete with my neighbor. One, because I'm limitless and there is no boundary to what I can become. And two, it removes it because now I'm helping my neighbor. I'm helping my brother, my sister, my fellow human species member to come into that same thing, because there is space for them to be the full expression of who they are too, without being out of sync, out of joint with me, without that discord. There is space. In a limitless concept, limitless society, there is no discord. There's no need to worry about discord, because there's room for all of the individual expression in the whole. So that's a
That's
lot
such
to take
a
in. So
it's such a
I realize that.
beautiful it's such a beautiful thought, though, that there's space for us all, there's resources for us all. We're given, and we're just shoved down your throat, this lack mindset.
Absolutely.
Um And there's a thought of like, well, if I get, someone else doesn't get.
Right.
And that's just not kingdom finances. That's not kingdom resources. That's not kingdom time. It's not kingdom podcast viewers. Like that's just not how, that's not how it works.
That's right.
Yeah, that's just such a beautiful thing. Kim, you have any other thoughts?
No, I've just enjoyed this conversation so much, Jeff. Like, I love what you bring. I love that, we haven't really talked in quite a few months, and yet still the Father's still dealing with some of the same stuff with you at the same time as us. And I love to be able to come together and have these conversations. Um, but I kind of want to wrap it up right now because I want to maybe do a little bit extra for some bonus content, and dive a little bit more into one of the concepts you just brought up. Um, but I also want to encourage our listeners, please go find Jeff and his podcast. It's called Segullah Studios Podcast. It's on YouTube. You said it's on Substack, correct? Check out the show notes. We will have all of the links to his stuff. If you're interested in his music, you can find it from his website. But we love Jeff and we want you to love Jeff too.
Well, thank you.
Very much so true. Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for coming back again. It was such an honor to speak with you.
Amen. Appreciate it. Same here.
Awesome. We'll see you guys next time.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.